Pillow Chase has been a game I have been playing since October 30th, 2024, marked with a time capsule of a really shitty video that got 20 views, and I have loved the game ever since. I played a lot of Precode. It was my first ever ASIM, so it was naturally a completely new experience to me. However, despite how much fun I had playing the game, something ugly started to rear its head to me, much like it did to adult players. Survival gameplay was pretty damn boring, with no variety, being pretty much just a stepping stone to get past the prey monster. And then on April 25th, 2024, they added a new update, the Survival Perks update. A system that I thought was kinda decent, and spiced up survival gameplay quite a bit. However, it definitely wasn't a perfect system and fell short in a few areas, namely ruining the balancing, pushing the game into being even more survival-sided, making monster gameplay a whole lot less fun. But then, Recode happened, giving survivors a new system. Much like Precode, I played my fair share of Recode testing as well, and I found it really fun. One certain aspect I found interesting was the new class system, given it was just Frontliner at the time, but I thought the system was really cool and it could really shape up how survival gameplay plays. And now we arrive at present day, with the current class system, a system I, personally, am incredibly unsatisfied with, for a lot of reasons. The current class system kind of feels more like an afterthought, rather than a core gameplay component, with some designs feeling like they lack direction and variation. In this video, I'll go through the main issues I have as a whole with the system, along with a few issues I have with very specific classes. So firstly, let's start with one of the bigger complaints I have. So to explain this category, I'm just going to explain 3 classes. Frontliner. Pull out your shield to block damage, and then charge forward to knock back the killer. Usurper. Charge with a punch and then charge forward to knock back the killer, and block the block damage. Blade Runner. A class I have so much to say about later. Dash forward and block the block damage and knock back the killer. So in case you missed it, all 3 of these classes have a block or parry and knock back the killer in some way. It would be deceitful if I pretended that there was no variation in how they played, but at the end of the day, it is 3 survival classes that block and do something else to knock back the killer. Or you are Blade Runner, in which case you block and then do nothing. I feel as if there was a lot left to be desired with the variation in these movesets, and I will go into that when I get to class-specific changes I would make. The rest of the classes are unique in their own rights, even if there is some overlap still. Auxiliary and Vanisher having self-healing, which, I mean, it's not that much an overlap because Auxiliary can heal other people, but still something. And Timeshifter also having a knockback move for some reason, I don't really understand that one. However, yeah, besides the 3 classes I talked about at the beginning, most other classes don't have much more than ever so slight overlap, with enough differences to make them stand out on their own. So let's move on to the next category. Direction. Direction is basically how the class is meant to be played, and how it works within game. Whether that be with the 3 block classes previously and having too much of a similar direction, classes with really weird direction or just no direction at all, and finally, classes that do have direction, but they just don't really work. With that being said, I want to talk about 2 classes in particular, specifically Blade Runner and Spellcaster. Firstly, Blade Runner, who, I'll be completely honest, is the worst class in the entire game and has by far the worst intended direction. This class, by all intent and purpose, with its current moveset, should not be a survivalist. I mean, you're trying to tell me a slash that is basically this. does nothing when it hits a monster. You can't even say it's a good mobility tool because of a startup like that, it is always gonna lose you distance. This class had an actual good chance of being an offensive class that didn't rely on knockback, instead slowing down monsters. But apparently, being a survivalist is the better idea somehow. I just think it's a mistake to make this class into a survivalist, especially when it not only sucks as a survivalist, but is an actually interesting offensive class. Secondary is Spellcaster, a class that is probably my main one to play after Blade Runner got gutted. In concept, this class is mostly fine actually. A ranged healer is honestly a great way to do healers in ASIMs, given it's hard to get people to stand still while doing chase to heal. The problem starts when you realize 3 things though. 1. The heal requires a line of sight at all times, for an extended period, and if interrupted, even for a split second, you have to restart the couple second startup to heal. 2. The map design for Pillar Chase is very compact, with a lot of thorns, walls, and objects that constantly block line of sight. And lastly, despite being ranged, their second ability forces them to get close to the killer and actively put themselves at risk by taking extra damage during a long startup. Spellcaster, as it is now, really fails to be ranged at all and can barely help in chases due to how it conflicts with the map design. It's just kinda a worse healer than auxiliary in most cases. Overall, for my thoughts on direction, is that I think for future classes, they should have a much more strict guideline. Okay, this is what the class does, this is how it will help the team, and we will not change the core idea. This is to avoid something like Blade Runner will happen again, and making sure classes have clear identity, and not just confused on what they want to be. Future classes should also be made with more of the game in mind, like maps, the other survival classes, and how they interact with the monster. By now, I have discussed my main issues with the survival class system, so I think I can safely move on to the specific class sections. So let's go straight into this with Frontliner. I should also mention that I'll be giving each class a class rank. This is just how much I feel it fits into Pillar Chase and how much the class works. Honestly though, it's pretty arbitrary and I really only did it because I think it looks nice. So despite this class being one of the ones I talked about in the variations section, I actually think it's still a really well designed class and solves its function really well. Plus the block itself is much different from the others in the game, being more of a start tool than a parry. However, I do want to rework block a little so it's more team based. Whenever Frontliner blocks, a field will appear around them, and any teammates inside this field will also take less damage. To compensate, whenever Frontliner does block, they will start automatically draining stamina, 5 every second. That leads us to the second part of the rework, being the shield bash itself. Hitting a monster with the shield will now give stamina depending on how long you held block for. A quick and instant shield bash would probably give no stamina at all, but say hold it for 3 seconds and you could be rewarded with 50 stamina back. This is the help of the new block rework, given that getting hit by a monster does drain stamina and you'd also be automatically draining stamina, you'd probably be losing stamina insanely quick. I feel like that'd be enough to compensate for the new field that block gets now, where it defends teammates, but if that's too complicated such too much, I would say just give it the field, and don't worry about the other changes I made. Either way, I feel like that'd just make it better to help for the team. The proposed changes I made would hopefully make this class into a more defensive knockbacker. This would play more into the stalling aspect it already has for block, by making it help teammates as well. Besides that, I don't have anything else to say about Frontliner, so let's move on to Auxiliary. I'll keep this short and simple because I don't have much to say about the class. It solves the role of a support pretty well, and I don't see much wrong with it. The only thing I would give it is a small field so it would show what area it affects better. Rewind is gonna be untouched, since I think the concept is really cool. Instead, we will be reworking Burst, where just like before, upon activation, a ring will shoot out in the area in front of you, and if hit, the monster will be slowed by 70% for 2 seconds instead of knockback. This effectively does what the ability already does, just makes it feel more timey. Plus it sorta works into Rewind, making sure that you don't get hit during the windup. Usurper will be the first class we give an entirely new ability to, replacing Brock. And due to this, we will also be reworking the Empowerment passive. Brock will be replaced by an ability called Ground Pound. Ground Pound is an ability that acts like a mix between Timeshifter's Burst, being an AoE knockback, while also acting like Punch, Usurper's Edo ability, being a chargeable attack. Depending on how long it is held, the knockback on the AoE gets both stronger and larger. The Empowerment passive is no longer bound to Brock, because it doesn't exist. Instead, it is now more of a snowball passive. The more successful times you knock back the killer, either with Punch or Ground Slam, the Empowerment passive grows stronger. This would be signified by the glow on the fist becoming brighter and much more noticeable. They could also be given a bar on the side of the screen if needed. The more empowered the fist is, the stronger the knockback on Punch. However, if Usurper misses the punch, they lose all empowerment progress and have to work back up. Taking damage also drains some of it. Empowerment would also take longer to fill up depending on how many Usurpers there are. Overall, this would make Usurper a much more offensive class, and change its gameplay identity, making it contrast more with Frontrunner's defensive play and Blade Runner's hidden one strategy. Vanisher is a pretty alright class, but I think its priorities are a bit split. With Vanishing, it doesn't get rid of any indication abilities, meaning that if someone like Vahim uses Truthbind, even if you go invisible, you will still be highlighted. This makes it so that you should try to avoid getting chased in the first place. However, this doesn't synergize with the second ability, being Replenish. Self-healing works best when you are on a chase, escape, and then heal it off so you can be ready for the next one. However, with Current Vanish, you are encouraged to not get chased at all, meaning both abilities are weirdly not working together. The way I would fix this is making Vanish a much better escape tool. Upon use, it will get rid of all indication abilities on the survivor, make them purely invisible, along with giving a small speed boost during the entire duration of it. But this drains stamina at twice the original rate, and when exited, you will hit a winded state, taking a second to start regaining stamina. Sank Die of Death's Adrenaline. This allows you to escape, wait, and then heal back up much easier. But if it's too strong, maybe they can reduce their health again, back down to 60 or 70. This class is pretty great for what it is, and it doesn't need much changes. Granted, I think any ability that blinds you is annoying, but there's not much you can do about that. Really, the only thing I'd want to change is how it aims. Just make it aim where the mouse is, not where the head is. It makes aiming both abilities feel so awkward at times, though I do get the idea that it has to be facing them, so I would just put the survivor in shift lock while they're using the abilities. Spellcaster is a class that I think has a really good concept for support, being kind of like Bloom from Terror Realm. However, I believe both of their abilities have massive flaws that make them a pain to play. So that being said, let's start with how I would rework them. I have already said my problems with Spellcaster, but I'll just reiterate them here. The fact that to heal someone, you need to have a full line of sight of them for a full 2 uninterrupted seconds to heal them is incredibly hard to do while they are in chase, due to the map design, which has multiple corners and obstacles that block line of sight. I know 2 seconds doesn't sound like a long time, but in ASIM it absolutely can be, especially as an uninterrupted time. I have another problem that is a pretty simple one, but one that is surprisingly impactful nonetheless. That being darkness. This could just be a me issue, given I am blind as shit and I play on low graphic settings, but sometimes it is insanely difficult to see who I am healing at longer distances. So I would rework the spell regeneration in 2 ways. One is a UI change, and another as functionality. For the UI change, I'd make it look something like this, showing the avatar of the person you're healing next to the prompt. This should help with healing specific people at distances or in the darkness. The second change is how I'd change how the healing works, given I don't think the map design is ever going to change to benefit Spellcaster, and I don't want to take away the long range aspect. Instead, I would make it so that as long as the heal is started within your line of sight, it will not get interrupted, even if they leave it by going behind walls and objects. This would make healing people much less frustrating and much easier to do. But if that's too broken... Dude, the heal is 25 health anyways. That is barely anything. It'll be fine. Now moving on to the second ability, the Spell of Durability. As I said before, I think it's a strange decision to make the ranged class have to go in close quarters to use one of their abilities. So I would instead rework it to instead be a sigil you can place on the ground. After being placed down, it will sit there for 20 seconds and will highlight anyone in its current field of effect, both monsters and survivors. Upon activating, the sigil goes bright blue and will make every survivor in its AoE take 70% less damage for a second, allowing it to do something similar to a Flash Uber from Team Fortress 2, given a quick second of huge damage resistance to block a hit if timed right. This again would focus on them being a ranged class and to stay out of danger. Granted, it would now take setup, but I feel like that fits more for a ranged class than just running in and hoping not to die. The class that really got me making this video, given I think it has the most bizarre balancing and direction I've seen in a survival ever. On release, it was a bit of an oppressive class, given a 70% speed reduction to monsters hit by the dash slash. However, it was then nerfed down to 40, and felt like a really cool class. It was the most fun and unique confrontation class in the game, especially because it did something that wasn't knockback. And then they removed the slowdown on Slash, and gave it more start lag, making it not just completely unable to help the team, but also a completely unviable escape tool. With the position this class is in now, it's by far the worst class in the game, given it's now impossible to help the team, and isn't even good at being a survivalist with its high amounts of start lag, making it way too hard to utilize and chase. I think as it is now, there is 2 options to go with this. If they want to keep trying to make it a survivalist, go back to the drawing board and change its kit entirely, because of the abilities it has now, it just doesn't feel like a survivalist. Or 2, this class's direction should just go back to how it was, going back to being a support that slows monsters with a slash, and just stop trying to make it a survivalist, because it's in by far the most boring state as one, and if I have a katana, I'm gonna want to slash it. In the end, this video did become a bit more of a thought experiment than I originally planned, but I do hope it was at least entertaining and brought my problems up with the crash system in a good enough way. To go over it one last time, I say that the Pillar Chase crash system just needs to be a bit more focused on the designs so something like Blade Runner doesn't happen again, and to make sure that the crashes feel distinct enough to play. I think we really shouldn't get any more knockback crashes for a while. Especially because it's been so hard to code. And I'd love to see more varied and innovative crash designs in the game, along with fixing the current ones, whether it be touch-ups or just reworks. Anyways, that's all I got. I gotta finish this video soon, before the game gets updated and my video is outdated. So, bye.